Academics could learn a whole lot from the Wolf of Wall Street. And no, I'm not talking about buying $1,000 suits, slicking your hair back, doing drugs, breaking the law, cheating on your wife, conning people out of millions, and ending up in jail. Most academics just aren't that interesting. I'm referring to the fact that Jordan Belfort, aka the Wolf, has some attributes and practices that can be used positively to improve your academic skills. Don't believe me? Keep watching. Number 1, dress for success. Did you ever wonder when you were watching the film The Wolf of Wall Street why it was that the Stratton Oakmont employees dressed in expensive suits despite the fact that their customers they're trying to convince to invest, they can't actually see them? Remember, these are all cold calls, telephone calls. Now these days, most of us who actually work from home, we throw on a nice shirt on the top half, but it's probably pajama bottoms on the bottom half. And that's only if we have a video call scheduled. I dread to think what it's like if you have no meetings that day. What do you wear at home? So why did these guys not do that? Why did they always suit up even though the customers were never going to see them? Well, the reason is they understood the benefits of enclosed cognition. And what I'm referring to is the scientific fact that how you dress actually impacts how you feel about yourself and therefore how you perform at a given task. These guys had to be confident on the phones. They had to convey certainty to the customers in order to persuade them to invest. Now you're probably wondering, hey Dean, I'm an academic, I'm not a salesman, so how does this apply to me? Well, when you're giving a talk or a presentation, what you're doing is you're simultaneously selling both yourself and your ideas to the audience. You need to get them to buy in, so to speak. You need people to have that certainty that not only are your experimental methods robust, but your data is reliable. And if they can believe both those things, then they can believe in you, your conclusions and your narrative, the story that you're trying to spin to them. There's no better way of doing that than taking advantage of something called enclosed cognition. You need to look like the kind of academic who knows what they're doing. So for guys, that means at a minimum, button-up shirt and trousers. Ideally, if you want to level up, throw on a sports jacket or a blazer, maybe even a tie. If it is something more formal, like a conference presentation, go for that full suit look. You will notice, you'll start to notice people take you more seriously. Opportunities that seemed out of reach and invisible to you before, they're now appearing before your very eyes because you no longer look like a first-year undergrad. Number 2, use the best words. One thing that's not always apparent or obvious in The Wolf of Wall Street is the use of scripts. Leonardo DiCaprio did such a fantastic job of capturing how verbally articulate Jordan Belfort is, his charm. But if we think back to early on in the film, we actually see Belfort on his first day at a small brokerage firm, and he sells thousands of dollars of worthless stock. Now in real life, he didn't do this off the cuff the way it's portrayed in the film. He actually sat for a few hours working on a script to sell that stock. Only when he had it perfected, did he launch into the phone call that we see in the movie. Now when it comes to academics, we tend to be divided on this issue. There tends to be two schools of thought here. One side swears by scripts, whereas the other side says, no, you should probably wing it a bit more because it sounds more natural.
I don't read a script, script reads me.
What the hell does that even mean?
Now the truth, as always, is somewhere in the middle. Scripting is crucial, but so is learning to read a script without sounding like you're reading a script. Now the reason I recommend you script out your talks, and this goes double if you're a beginner, it's that the probability that the words that are going to come out of your mouth on the first time are going to be the perfect words, it's virtually zero. Okay, this almost never happens. In fact, barely anyone in the world can do this. You might think, oh, celebrities, actors, people you see in TV and film, they are very verbally articulate, but they're not. They're all reading from scripts. Someone has taken time and has been paid to write the perfect words for them to say. And it's the actor's job to say them naturally, as if they're not reading a script, and that's a skill you need too. So what I want you to do is spend some time working on your script before you do anything, before you even start practicing. Get that script honed in. Make sure it's written in a similar way to how you actually speak. That's very important. You don't want to use words that you wouldn't use in a normal conversation or sound strange when they come out of your mouth, because this will come across to the audience as a little bit wooden, a little bit robotic. Once you've got the script down, you need to practice, okay? Practice reading this a few times until you've got, not it perfectly memorized, but you want to get the gist from start to finish. Be able to reproduce it relatively reliably, maybe with some natural variation each time. Now, this is particularly important for PhD students out there, okay? If you're a PhD student early on in your journey, you're going to be presenting the same project for 3 years, possibly 4 or 5, okay? So early on, you want to find the best words for introducing that project because you're going to be using them again and again and again. And over time, they will be baked into your brain. Okay, now that we've got that out of the way, number 3, making it sound natural. Personally, what I do is I like to rehearse a script 4 to 5 times minimum. That helps me spot any areas that maybe sound a bit robotic or not really how I'd express it myself. Okay, then I can fix them. And by the 5th go, I have the gist and the flow memorized, and I'm confident enough that I can get up in front of an audience and go from start to finish and hit all those main points. Will I be able to get it 100% right every time, word for word? No, okay? In fact, I don't even try to do that. And what I'd recommend you do is to avoid this as well, okay? Especially if you're a beginner. If you try and perfectly perform your script, word for word, it's a recipe for disaster. The reason I say that is because the minute you deviate from the script, you will start to introduce filler words. And usually what happens is you will freeze, okay? I've seen it happen hundreds of times. People have the script mentally memorized, and the minute they deviate, it throws them off. Instead, what I recommend you do is enjoy those small deviations and fluctuations from the script, because those are the things that when they come out in the moment, it helps you sound more natural. In Belfort's book, Way of the Wolf, he actually has a name for this principle. It's called the straight line. Now, academics, you can think of it like this. You're on the straight line when you're word for word in sync with your script. But above and below the straight line, we have these boundaries. And you approach these boundaries when you deviate from the script. Maybe you go on a little bit of a tangent, maybe you tell an anecdote or a bit of a joke or something like that. Now, the space between the straight line, your script, and those boundaries above and below, that is dictated by the amount of time you have for your talk. Maybe you're a postdoc or a lecturer and you have a 1-hour lesson to give to students. These boundaries might be quite large, okay? You've got a bit of time to play with, lots of room for tangents and anecdotes. But if it's a 10-minute talk, it's going to be pretty tight. Okay, now on to number 4, tonality. Another reason Jordan Belfort was such a believer in scripts and learning them was because he honestly didn't want to spend his bandwidth and his brain power thinking about what the best words to say were. Instead, he wanted to spend his brain power focusing on the tonality, how he said those words. How we communicate from person to person is largely nonverbal. You've probably heard that before. Body language makes up a huge component of how we communicate. Now, these guys in the Wolf of Wall Street, they're on the phone. So body language is at 0%. But that doesn't mean it's entirely verbal in how they're communicating, because tonality, how they say those words, plays a huge role as well. Some of the tonalities Jordan Belfort is particularly good at are things like certainty, bottled enthusiasm, and sincerity, sounding like he's telling someone a secret. Now, you might wonder, how can I use these as an academic? Sure, I can see that they might be useful in sales, but how do I use them in my own talk? If you're saying something, maybe you're revealing a finding you have that, it's very surprising, and you want to convey that it's surprising without telling people, hey, this was really surprising. What you do is this, you say, hey guys, no one has ever found this before. We've just discovered protein X actually has an effect on protein Y. Never before been documented. What am I doing there? I'm lowering my voice a little bit. I'm speaking a little bit slower, so I'm varying the pace, and I'm building in some natural pauses. And this naturally leads your audience to think, wow, this is quite intriguing. I understand this is something novel that's been discovered. In other words, they know and they start to feel the way you want them to feel because of your tonality. Bottled enthusiasm is another really good one. This is perfect for when you're doing the introduction to your talk, when you're setting the scene, okay? You want to be careful here though, because you don't want to sound like Mickey Mouse on crack, okay? That's not what we're going for. We're going for bottled enthusiasm. So you don't want to sound like, hey guys, oh my goodness, I'm so excited to be with you here today. We're gonna, no, that's a bit too wild, a bit too rogue for an academic talk. But at the same time, you don't want to fall into the trap that most PhD students fall into, where they're nervous and they go full monotone. So they'll go, "Hi, my name is Dean, and today I'm going to be talking about my project that is entitled," it's too monotone. Okay, people are going to fall asleep. They're going to jump out the window. Instead, you go for controlled enthusiasm. "Good morning, everyone. My name is Dean. Really excited to be here today to tell you about my project XYZ. I've been working on this for about 2 years, and today I'm going to reveal some of the findings, some somewhat surprising, some expected, and by the end, you're going to understand a bit more about how X influences Y." Bottled enthusiasm. What it's going to do is it's going to make your audience really engaged in what you have to say, and it'll set you apart from the crowd. Now, the final thing I think every academic can learn from The Wolf of Wall Street is invention and reinvention. When I'm talking about invention, what I mean is Jordan Belfort wasn't always the Wolf of Wall Street. Before that, he was actually a door-to-door salesman. One of his first jobs was selling meat door-to-door. You can imagine how many doors he would have knocked on, and people would just slam the door in his face. They would say no. I'm sure some of them were particularly rude to him. Now, most of us, when we go up and do a presentation and it doesn't go particularly well, particularly when we're starting out, we immediately say to ourselves, well, that's it. It's just not something I'm good at. I'm just not good at presentations. Never have been, never will be. But what Jordan Belfort knew was that every no, every failure, quote unquote, got him closer to a yes, to success. He was getting closer to that door where someone was eventually going to say, yeah, you know what? I will buy some meat. And it's the exact same in academia. It's the same. When you're developing a skill, every time you present, you're not going to win an award, but you should be improving incrementally. You're getting closer to the talk that wins the award. Maybe it's the 10th presentation you make. Maybe it's the 50th presentation. Eventually, people are going to look at you if you're improving each time, and they're going to say, wow, that person, Dean's just naturally good at presentations. So that's invention, but what do I mean by reinvention? Well, Jordan Belfort famously went to prison, but that's not where the story ends. You see, Jordan Belfort emerged from prison. He was no longer allowed to be a stockbroker, but he became very wealthy once again. He became successful again. This time somewhat more ethically, because he reinvented himself. Not as a stockbroker, but he changed to a public speaker, to a sales trainer. He published books on how to do these things, and he's become a huge success once again. And this is something that academics can most certainly do, and I would encourage you to do this yourself. Maybe part of your identity that you've created for yourself is that you're just not great at public speaking. You're just not great in the lab, or you're just not great at academic writing. You can reinvent that identity through practice, hard work, and structure, and learning these principles that I talk about on this channel. You can change your identity over time from someone who sucks at public speaking into someone that maybe your lab turns to when they need someone to present their work. Maybe your wider research group turns to, or maybe it's even in your personal life. You go to a wedding, best man doesn't turn up, we need someone to do the speech. Everybody looks at you because they know you're confident and you have that ability to perform under pressure. If this is something that you're interested in, this is something you've always wanted to be able to do, improve these skills of speaking and writing, check out the link in the description of today's video. I've recently launched an academic coaching program where I use my 10 years of experience in academia to work with people, students, postdoc lecturers, turn them from presentation zeros to presentation heroes. Okay, so if that sounds like your dream come true, something you've always wanted to get good at, but you never really had an idea of where to begin, you needed some sort of structure, what I want you to do is click on the link in the description and schedule your free consult call using that link. Folks, let me know, did I miss anything? Were there any other good habits or traits, things you admired when you saw The Wolf of Wall Street for the first time? Let me know down in the comments below, okay? And don't forget, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe. Lets the YouTube algorithm know to show this content to more people. Thank you very much.